Good afternoon. This is the JP Dinnell podcast. I am JP Dinnell, and I have Lucas with me, and this is our YouTube exclusive. What's up, nerd?
What's going on, man?
How are you?
I'm fantastic.
Yeah.
Adjusting to having this new baby at the house.
Let's go.
Oof.
When's he gonna start pulling his weight?
No time soon.
Yeah.
The other one's a slacker too.
Yeah,
It's
that
unbelievable.
happens. Yeah.
They're really cute though.
Yeah, they are. Your kids are awesome.
They make Kirsten really happy, and I think they're really funny. So
there you go.
That counts. So they are pulling their weight in entertainment value and adorability, if I can use that word.
I think
if
it's
I can
a
make
word.
A word up. Yeah.
I mean, if you're asking me for clarification on something's a word,
I just need you to agree that sounds pretty good.
I mean, it's a word I would use and
Done.
probably make up.
You're welcome.
So there you go.
Adorability, free for all of you now. Thanks to the JP Dinnell podcast.
Hey, these Q&A sessions, I just want to say thank you to our listeners and the people that watch. Obviously, you're watching, you're on YouTube, because this has really helped boost the algorithms for YouTube.
Sure. Yep.
And it's just awesome. And this is going to help the community that we are trying to create grow. So we appreciate you guys watching these, commenting, and also the people that share them. That's huge. Just a little simple screenshot on your phone, posting it on Instagram, tagging us has been awesome. So thank you. We appreciate you guys. I don't even want to say we'll do it this year, because I'm gonna be honest, the likelihood of us being able to do it this year is probably very minimum. But I would love to do a meetup.
Bro, that'd be so fun.
Like a meetup for the listeners,
to
where we just get together and grill out some little Calico steaks and burgers. Maybe go I don't know. Like, I want to do something where it's, I don't know. You know, part of me, like, if I'm being completely transparent,
I would love that.
But there's like a legit fear of like doing it and like 2 people show up. Which I still think would be cool.
It would be the Nudesons that would show up, so we'd have a good time.
We know 100% they're showing up. 100%. Man.
And they can bring their Princess Bride jokes, and we'll all crack up about it.
You would have the time of your life.
I would love it. Yep.
I don't know. Is that fun? Is that weird that that's like not a concern, but a thought of mine?
No.
Is that my ego?
But it has to be.
Yeah,
right? Yeah, it has to be.
Way. Because I guess,
I don't know if it's your ego getting in the way, but it's your ego that is forcing you to do a true, honest assessment, like so that kind of fear.
But why
that's
would it
creeping
matter?
In,
but why
kind of fear that's creeping in is going to be, hey, is this an honest? It would matter because you would need to know, or you would want to know whether or not it was a worthwhile investment to do. Because your time is valuable. The steaks we would be grilling would be valuable.
Yeah, and I guess I'd have to know, like, I mean, I wouldn't sell tickets to it, but like, how would we know who's coming? Like, make it to where it's like $1, like you have to pay $1, so that way we could, at least know.
Right.
Like,
so you've got a training that you're doing in DFW.
Yeah.
Right. That's coming up on June 11th.
Yes.
Right. So if there's people who just want to come and listen to you do the Echelon Front, extreme ownership training, then they can come do that. But we could use that same kind of back end and put together something there where, like, hey, the tickets are free. It's a free code to get the tickets, but there's a limited number of things available. We can make that happen.
I think it would be cool.
It'd be fun. Would you come? That's what I want to know.
Would you come to the event?
Who would of our audience, like, who would make the time if we made it like an all day thing? We're gonna hang out. We'd have to. But I'll get some bounce houses, some No, we could make it fun, man. I think a meetup would be a blast.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. All right, cool. What do we got?
Yep. All right. So this is an old question, and it's one that I've waited to ask because I needed to do a little bit of research and figure out, like, what the heck this guy's even talking about. No, because it's a philosophical question, and it is from John Pera. JP, I'm interested to hear your personal dissection/interpretation of Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, specifically his assertion on the necessities of peace in times of war. In Meditations, Aurelius wrote that war is not a thing to be loved, but a thing to be avoided. While Aurelius was referencing battles between warring states, this is for listeners who aren't familiar with him, he is the emperor who dies at the beginning of Gladiator. I think the same can be said of interpersonal turmoil, he says, and as you noted, sharing your own story, there are times to be at war with yourself and times to be at peace with choices that you've made. Thanks for all you do. Looking forward to listening to a future episode. especially those diving into stoicism, which this guy, I believe, is one of the pictures at Leif's gym.
Stoic Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah, it's Stoic Jiu-Jitsu. So what do you think of that quote? War is not a thing to be loved, but a thing to be avoided.
I agree. War is hell.
Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, war brings out the worst in people. War also brings out the best in people. I've seen incredibly heroic actions from people in war. And I've also seen horrific actions from people in war towards innocent people. You know, the insurgent fighters that we were going up against in Ramadi were doing horrific evil things to innocent people. And I saw young, brave soldiers and Marines taking the fight to them.
Yeah.
And trying to protect those innocent people. So the thing with war is it's been around since the beginning of time, and it will always be around. War is not going to go away because we're talking about humans that are flawed and humans that are influenced through good and bad, right? You have spiritual warfare that is going on, and you know, like, war is a nasty thing, man. Now in regards to going to war with yourself to fight against the complacency and the laziness, and to fight against your anger, to fight against your inability to control your emotions, to fight against your lust and your greed. Yeah, those are things that you definitely have to go to war with.
Yeah.
You know, your desire to lie and exaggerate and spread rumors, like, that's something that you should go to war with.
100%.
You know, those are bad things. So I do not enjoy war. I have enjoyed what I've been able to do in war because we were protecting innocent people. There's a difference there. I didn't like the fact that we were at war because you saw the impact that it had. You know, I mean, you see the impact that it's having right now. And we better get our stuff together here in this nation before it comes here. If
100%.
we're not already on the brink of that.
Yeah.
But, you know, like that, like, man, there's so many ways to go about like answering this question. I mean, because there's undeniable, there's a huge money aspect to war.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are companies that literally only thrive if we're at war.
Oh, yeah.
And there are politicians that only thrive when we're at war. And the investments that they have made only do well when we're at war. So people are ignorant to that. Like that, and that's what blows my mind, is that people actually don't realize that that's a real thing. The war machine is a real thing.
The war profiteering is
the
a
war
legit
profiteering
thing?
is a real thing. I mean, none of their sons or daughters or nephews or nieces are going to be a part of that because they protect them.
Yeah.
So, go back to that quote again.
So the quote
Please.
Yeah. The quote is, war is not a thing to be loved, but a thing to be avoided.
Yeah, I agree.
So I've been reading. I just finished up.
Is it necessary at times?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%. And I don't want somebody to twist what I'm saying, which cool, you will. There's a handful of keyboard warriors that will do that. Then twist it the wrong way. I'm not saying that it's not necessary. There are times where it is necessary, right? You have to be able to defend yourself and defend other people that are innocent and other people that are not capable of defending themselves 100%. And we should always do that. And as a nation, we should always stand behind our military, and we should always stand behind defending the innocent and defending the weak at all costs. However, we should not be looking for war, nor should we be starting wars. That is what I believe.
So I just finished up A Wing and a Prayer, which is a book by Harry Crosby, who's the lead navigator of the 8th Army Air Force 100th of the B-17 bombers. The Bloody 100th. He's one of one of 3 guys that was a day one member of the Bloody 100th that survived the entirety of their deployment in the war. And so finishing up his book, he talks about how when he came home, he became a voice for pacifism and was talking about the necessity to stay out of foreign wars for the United States people. And then he struggled a lot with whether or not, in particular, like the bombing runs that they did, whether or not they were effective. And he talks about, you've talked about how you got the pictures of the girls' school in Ramadi.
Yeah.
After you came home. He said that they were flying over Holland and they're delivering these mercy missions, right? Which was like Operation Manna Chowhound. I think the British called it Manna. The U.S. called it Chowhound. And what they started to see is that all these people had these things, and I forget what they called them. They called them like happy hats or something like that. And they were hats, and they were dresses, and they were all of these things that were made out of the silk from the parachutes of the American paratroopers who were shot down, because they would go out, they would hide, or sorry, not the American paratroopers, the American bombers that were shot down, because they would go and they would take the parachute and they would hide the parachute so that the Germans couldn't find the parachute and come looking for an American that they thought was downed over that place. And so they would take the parachutes and they would turn it into clothes. So they would make skirts and they would make hats and they would make all of these things out of it so that the Germans didn't know that they were harboring American fugitives in German-occupied territory.
Holy cow.
And whenever they were doing all these mercy missions, they took all of those white silk hats and their silk dresses and things like that, and they began to dye them in different colors, which they weren't allowed to wear before, dye them in different like bright colors as a way to say thank you to all the soldiers. And he said, so they're flying over, they're doing these mercy missions, they're delivering food and like all of this stuff. And then you would see all these people in these really brightly colored hats and scarves and skirts and all these things. And it was those people who had harbored Americans that helped them get back to safety.
Yeah.
Whenever they found them in fields or nursed them back to health and those kind of things to get them back home.
I mean, we definitely had a lot of Iraqis and Afghanis that were thankful for everything that we were doing.
Yeah.
And, that was undeniable. The media is going to twist whatever they need to do based off of what's going to be best for them, right? And sometimes it's the truth and sometimes it's not the truth. Most of the time it's not the truth.
Right.
That's why what Leif Babin's wife, Jenna, does with Smarter News is incredible, because it's facts and it's unbiased facts about what's actually happening, what you need to know. And it's incredible what she has with Smarter News. But yeah, I mean, war is, I hope my son never sees it. I hope my kids never see it. The likelihood of that, though, is I'm not very hopeful with those odds, unfortunately.
That is the dichotomy of having boys, right?
Yeah.
Is that like you're excited that like, all right, I got a son and like this is gonna be awesome. But when you look at like the world we grew up in, that when we were teenagers, like how many of our friends went and enlisted after 9/11?
Yeah.
How many? For you were what, day 6 in boot camp, whatever it happened.
Yeah.
Right. Like a lot of the guys that I knew.
Yeah,
immediately.
And my brother went in after me, and my sister as well, right?
Yeah.
And so it's
like
not.
It changed all of that stuff for a lot of people. They were like, hey, you know what? We're going to war.
Yeah.
And again, like going through some of these old World War II memoirs, the guys who were, the Helmet for My Pillow by Robert Leckie. Mm-hmm. He was a sports writer.
Yeah.
And he was like, I'm going into the Marines. Yeah. Like, this is it. This is what I'm doing.
That's crazy.
So it's wild. And having boys, it changes some of that a little bit, because like if anything were to happen at any point in time, right? Like our daughters are not going to get targeted for anything, but who is going to get?
Yeah.
Like it's going to be military age males.
Yeah. You mean like the massive amount of military age males that have been coming across our border illegally?
That was something that was a thought of mine.
Interesting.
for sure.
Yeah.
All right.
What do we got?
Yeah. Question number 2 from Motown Pontiac. It seems that not all, this is a longer question, so heads up. It seems that not all, but many of the SEAL/Spec Ops guys that are a little more well-known today profess to be believers in Christ. I think of yourself. I've had a conversation with Leif regarding his faith. Chris Kyle, Eddie Penny, Sean Ryan recently talked about his acceptance on a podcast. Redman, Ray Kerr, Tim Kennedy, and the list goes on. While perhaps some of them don't quite show that, quote, outward appearance, for lack of a better term, it doesn't seem to be something they shy away from. Could you speak into your experience with Christian guys within the teams and other spec op groups and how it is that Christ continually seems to be a consistent part of that? Or am I just seeing a coincidence?
Yeah, well, there's no coincidences.
Right.
Willing to bet he said the coincidence because maybe he listens to the Jesus and Jiu-Jitsu podcast, and we've talked about how many scholars believe that Hebrew is the root of all languages.
Sure.
And there is no Hebrew word for coincidence. Therefore, coincidence was a made-up word to take away from what God does.
Okay.
Okay. So that's where the whole no coincidence thing comes from. There's people that believe that, and there's people that argue it. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I understand the meaning. I understand the meaning behind that saying of there are no coincidences, because instead of us saying, oh, that's awesome that God did that for us, or, oh, that's awesome that God brought us together, people are saying, oh, that's a cool coincidence.
Yeah.
Therefore, I could definitely lean towards and believe that there is no coincidences in regards to like the root meaning of that word.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
Anyways, so in regards to the question, man, I guess it's hard for me to give like a non-biased answer for this, because faith has always been a part of my life.
Yeah.
And when I was in boot camp, the military, we are a Christian founded country.
Right.
And that was a big thing in our military. And I also just believe that, there are more and more people that are of public figures that have the military background that are experiencing God moments, and they're experiencing, a being drawn closer to God, and or they have people that are, exposing them to what, an actual relationship with Jesus is like, and what salvation is really like. And, these guys have a platform, so it's going to be easier for them to be able to talk about it. There's a lot of service members that, are saved, that believe in God, that have incredible, moments with God, and they have an incredible relationship with God, but they're not vocal about it on social media, or they just don't have a platform. And there are some people that, they're not trying to use their faith as something that's going to propel them,
Right.
which I can respect as well. So I don't think I have honestly a good answer for this question, other than for me, I've always had a relationship with God. Now, whether I was living my life the right way was definitely in question as I was a young adult, because I'd get off the path and I would, do the things that I shouldn't have been doing, and which we've talked about before. Definitely did not always live a good Christian life like I should have, which is unfortunate.
Right.
That's something that I will be, judged for, and that's something that I'm going to have to deal with. But I also know that I serve a loving God who has forgiven me for my sins.
Yeah.
And that I am forgiven, and I am redeemed, and that I am also covered by the blood that was shed on the cross for
Amen.
me. And I do have salvation, and my kids have salvation, my wife has salvation, and we're going to heaven. I know that. Factually, I know that.
Yeah.
It's an undeniable fact in my life. I can't speak on other people's behalf in regards to what's an undeniable fact for them unless I've had the actual conversation with them. For Leif, I know that he's saved. Yeah. So I can say, I know that Leif is saved. His wife, Jenna, is saved. Their kids are saved, right? Like they've had those conversations. And, based off, the text messages that I have with Sean Ryan and what he talks about on his podcast, he's saved. He was just baptized.
Yeah.
Guess what? He's going to heaven.
Yeah.
That's an undeniable fact. He accepted the fact that he was a sinner, and that the only way to be forgiven for his sins was accepting the fact that God sent his son down to die for our sins. And he knows that, that he confessed that Jesus came down, died on a cross for his sins, and rose from the grave 3 days later, right?
Yeah.
And so based off of that, the fact that he's prayed that prayer, accepted Jesus into his life, asked for forgiveness, got baptized, I know that he's going, like Tim Kennedy, I don't know. Like, I don't know Tim. Like, I haven't ever met Tim. We haven't talked.
If Tim wants to come on the show, we'd be fine with that.
And we can talk about this, right?
Yeah, for sure.
These are things that, so I have a hard time speaking on behalf of other people. Now, in regards to it being a part of their life and part of just the military, it is something that our military talks about. We, faith is a part of, hey, when you're in the military, like, hey, what do you want put on your dog tags? Like, are you Christian? What denomination? Part of your, setting up your will. That's part of it, like your funeral, like what type of a funeral, what type of belief, what type of, so these are things that we talk about in the military. But I can only speak for myself, and, God was always a part of my life, and he was a major part of my time in the military. And I was never afraid to share my faith, nor was I ever ashamed to share my faith, nor will I ever be ashamed or afraid to share my faith, nor will I ever deny that. And a lot of these guys that he listed are bold individuals, and I'm willing to bet
no doubt
that that's why it stands out, because they are bold with their faith in addition to the other things that they do in their life.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if I answered that the right way, but I have a hard time, talking about other people in regards to their thoughts and beliefs when I don't know factually.
But your experience was that there were a lot of people of faith
100%
in the military. Right?
Yes.
And one of the things I think is interesting is we're seeing kind of a juxtaposition of this from the arenas that I'm kind of in, right? So when it comes to like the philosophical debates around Christianity as a sustainable worldview and philosophy. There's a guy named Richard Dawkins who wrote a book several years ago. He's an atheistic scholar, zoologist, brilliant dude though. And he wrote a book called The God Delusion. And it was talking about how no rational, logical person could believe in a God that has no beginning and no end and is a complete sovereign over the universe and is an ultimate creator and all that kind of stuff. Within the last few weeks, he's come out and he's like, look, I'm very proud to be from the UK. I'm very proud to be particularly from England, from a country that is based on Christian ethics. I'm proud of our Christian heritage, even though I don't believe it, because I think that it is what is necessary in order to build a healthy society is a foundation of these types of beliefs. And he's like, and if you look at other systems of belief and the societies that have been built from that, they typically end up being in turmoil for one reason or another. So it's a strange thing that is happening sort of in the scholarly world, where we have seen it, I think, from guys in the military that talk about that kind of stuff, that are much more open with their faith. And maybe they're more open with their faith because they're faced with a mortality that is different than the rest of us, right? Like, I might get in an accident on the way home. Something could happen to me, right? Mm-hmm. But and then we would kind of just say, well, it was just his time. But I'm not going into danger every day. There is not something where like I'm not facing any kind of imminent threats that could end my life, right? Whereas people in the military, they do. You guys did day in and day out, and so I think that has a different kind of boldness. It's interesting to me though that in the scholarly world we're starting to see like this shift over, people who were pushing like rationally, logically, you can't believe these things, to like, hey, maybe rationally and logically you shouldn't be able to believe it, but they're a wonderful basis for a system of government and societally. And I think that now we're starting to see that there's some of those folks too that are like, all right, so if this is a wonderful basis for a system of government, if it's great for societal things, maybe there's more to it than that. And they're ending up discovering more than what they thought was initially there whenever they were, in opposition to faith. So it's been an interesting discussion.
Yeah, and I think it's because also, and I think this ties back to what I said at the beginning of my answer, is I think a lot more people in society are are feeling that there is a shift and that things are starting to be a little more uncertain.
Yeah.
I think people are really seeing the spiritual warfare that's going on. People are really starting to see evil being more prevalent. And that scares people.
Yeah.
And people know the opposite of the evil demonic things that are out there. You really actually know the true opposite of that is God.
Yep.
It's not just good, it's God. Because if the devil is real, then God is real.
Yeah.
And people are realizing and feeling that. And I think people are recognizing, it's okay to believe in something you can't fully comprehend. But what's cool is that when people are going out on, taking that step of faith and saying, hey, God, if you're real, show me. Let me feel you. Let me see. Let me experience you. And then when they feel the presence of God or a miracle happens or something, where God's like, oh, cool. Hey, I've been here this whole time. Or, because you hear stories of that. People are like, hey, I prayed out to God. Like, hey, if you're real, show me. Like, show me something. Let me experience something. And then it happens. And they're like, okay, undeniable. And that's what's cool. Like, if you just pray that, hey, God, show me that you're real. He will.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. And then back to the hats we were talking about. They were called happiness hats or liberation hats and liberation skirts.
That's
and
so
you
cool.
can check them out. They're pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Got like different patterns and stuff like that brings that to it. And one of the things that, again, that Crosby was talking about is when he got to this point where he's questioning everything years after. It was the people in the German Luftwaffe who came out and did a study, and they were like, hey, the work that y'all did, that the Americans did in particular, in bombing the ball bearing factories, prevented us from being able to put planes and tanks into the European theater, and is what won the war. And looking back on that, he gets this letter from this lady, or reads a letter from this lady years after, that talks about how the liberation of Europe saved their faith. And it's just, and he goes, as a person of faith, you often wonder like what the costs are. Is there such thing as a just war and blah blah blah. He goes, but I say blah blah blah. I'm not meaning to trivialize it.
I know.
But as the argument goes on, and he goes, if what we did kept one person that was innocent from being taken advantage of or from being put under an evil regime or dying a horrible death,
it's worth it.
Then he goes, then it is. He goes, our souls may bear the burden of it throughout eternity.
Yeah.
He goes, but the liberated will have the freedoms that they never should have had stolen. Yeah. So pretty cool. One of those is freedom of religion, our ability to have our faith.
100%, which is a beautiful thing. And, as we close it out, I know we've talked about this many times on air, off air, but, the fact that those little girls in Ramadi were able to go to school was pretty incredible. You know, because when we were there was no forms of education allowed for women and children.
Yep.
And about 15 months after we left, the first all-girls school was established in Ramadi. And
so cool, man.
It's like one of my favorite pictures to look at and to show people and to share and to remind my kids also. Like, I'll send that to my kids and be like, hey, what we get to do, it's a privilege.
Yep.
And for that alone, would I go do everything that we did again? Like, because at the beginning, I'm like, yeah, war is hell. It's horrible. I've seen evil things. Would I go do everything that I did in Ramadi over again, knowing what those kids were able to have?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like, there's not even a question. Like, I would go do it right now. If you were like, hey, you're going to be gone for a year, though. You're going to be gone for a year from your wife and your kids. There's a risk. There's a major risk associated with what you're going to do for the next year. However, if you go do this, this is what will probably happen. These freedoms will be given back to people. You'll eliminate evil people. These people won't live in fear. They'll have freedom of education, freedom of religion, freedom to like live their lives and to go to work and school. You know what I mean? Like they'll have all these things. There's a high likelihood of that. But it's going to be really risky for you. And you're going to be away from your family for a year. I would say, cool. How much time do I have to prepare?
Yeah.
Do I have a month? Do I have 6 months? You know, and I would go do it again, without a doubt. So there are things that are worth fighting for, and we have to be willing to fight for those things.
Amen.
Cool. All right. Well, as always, we appreciate you guys listening to the JP Dinnell podcast and these YouTube exclusives that we do. We appreciate everyone that's been listening, subscribing, sharing. That's huge for us. So let us know what you think in the comments. Also, any questions that you have for future Q&A sessions, put them down in the comments so we can get to them. As always, I'm JP Dinnell with Lucas. We appreciate everything that you guys do to support us. Have a great night, y'all.